On a cold, gray day, a man named Bill was walking down a path. Everywhere he looked, he saw only snow and ice. This was his first winter in the far-off place called Alaska. Bill was wearing a lot of warm clothes and fur boots, but he still felt cold and not comfortable. He was trying to get to a camp near a place called Stone Creek, where his friends were already waiting. He hoped to get there by 6 in the evening when it would be dark. He knew his friends would have a fire going, hot food ready for him. A large, gray dog followed Bill. This dog was part wolf and didn't like the cold at all. The dog knew it was too cold to be out, but Bill kept walking. Soon he got to a frozen creek named Pine Stream. He carefully walked on the snow-covered ice, knowing this way would take him straight to his friends at Stone Creek. While he was walking, he looked closely at the icy path ahead of him. He quickly moved around a spot where the ice looked thin. He could tell an underground spring was flowing beneath it. He knew that if he stepped there and fell into the water, his wet boots would make him very cold and he could freeze to death. Around noon, Bill decided it was time to eat lunch. He took off the glove on his right hand, opened his jacket and shirt, and pulled out his food. It took less than 20 seconds, but already his fingers started to feel cold. He hit his hand against his leg several times until he felt a sharp pain. Then he quickly put his glove back on his hand. Bill made a fire, starting with small pieces of wood and then adding larger ones. He sat on a log covered in snow and ate his lunch. He sat near the warm fire for a few minutes, then got up and started walking on the frozen creek again. Half an hour later, something happened. At a place where the snow looked very solid, the ice broke. Bill's feet sank into the water. The water was not deep, but his legs got wet up to the knees. Bill was upset because this would delay his arrival at the camp. He now had to build a fire to dry his clothes and boots. Bill walked over to some small trees. They were covered with snow, and their branches held pieces of dry grass and wood left from floods earlier in the year. He put several large pieces of wood on the snow under one of the trees. On top of the wood, he put some grass and dry branches. He pulled off his gloves, took out his matches, and lit the fire. He fed the growing flame with more wood. As the fire grew stronger, he added larger pieces of wood. He did all this slowly and carefully. When it's 60 degrees below zero and a man's feet are wet, he can't afford to fail in building a fire. While he was walking, his blood had kept his body warm, but now that he had stopped, the cold was making his blood pull back into his body. His wet feet were freezing. He couldn't feel his fingers. His nose was also frozen. The skin all over his body felt cold, but now his fire was starting to burn stronger. He felt safe. He sat under the tree and thought about the old men in a town called Fairbanks. The old men had warned him that no man should travel alone in this cold place when the temperature is 60 degrees below zero. But here he was. He had had an accident. He was alone, and he had saved himself. He had built a fire. He thought those old men were weak. A strong man could travel alone. If a man stayed calm, he would be okay. Bill's boots were frozen. The strings on his boots were as hard as metal. He would have to cut them with his knife. He leaned back against the tree to take out his knife. Suddenly, without warning, a big load of snow fell down. His movement had shaken the tree a tiny bit, but it was enough to make the branches of the tree drop their heavy load. Bill was surprised. He sat and looked at the place where the fire had been. He thought the old men had been right. If he had another man with him, he wouldn't be in danger now. The other man could build the fire. Well, it was up to him to build the fire again. This time, he must not fail. Bill collected more wood. He reached into his pocket for the matches, but his fingers were frozen. He couldn't hold them. He hit his hands against his legs as hard as he could. After a while, he started to feel his fingers again. Bill reached again into his pocket for the matches, but the freezing cold quickly made his fingers numb again. All the matches fell onto the snow. He tried to pick one up, but failed. Bill put his glove back on and hit his hand against his leg again. Then he took the gloves off both hands, picked up all the matches. Holding them with both hands, he struck the matches against his leg. They immediately caught fire. He held the burning matches to a piece of wood. After a while, he noticed that he could smell his hands burning. Then he felt the pain. He opened his hands and the burning matches fell onto the snow. The flame went out with a puff of gray smoke. Bill looked up. The dog was still watching him. Bill had an idea. He would kill the dog and put his hands inside its warm body. Once his fingers could feel again, he could build another fire. He called the dog over, but the dog heard something scary in Bill's voice and backed away. Bill called again, and this time the dog came closer. Bill reached for his knife, but he had forgotten that his fingers couldn't bend. He couldn't kill the dog because he couldn't hold his knife. The fear of dying came over Bill. He jumped up and started to run. Running made him feel better. Maybe running would make his feet warm. If he ran far enough, he would get to his friends at Stone Creek. They would take care of him. It felt strange to run and not feel his feet hit the ground. He fell several times. He decided to rest for a while. As he lay in the snow, Bill noticed that he wasn't shaking. He couldn't feel his nose or fingers or feet. Yet, strangely, he felt warm and snug. It dawned on him that he was about to die. Well, he thought, might as well face it bravely. There are worse ways to go. Bill closed his eyes and fell into the most peaceful sleep he'd ever known. The dog sat staring at him, waiting. After a while, it moved closer to Bill and picked up the scent of death. The dog tilted its head back and let out a long, sad howl to the cold stars in the black sky. Then it turned and ran toward Stone Creek, where it knew there would be food and a warm fire.